Good morning, everyone. It's traditional in our lineage to pay honor to the Native Americans who lived on this land for many thousands of years. And in this area, that was the northern Chumash, who lived here, worked here, and cared for the land for somewhere close to between 13,000 and 15,000 years. And so we pay homage to them. In addition, I'd like to dedicate this talk to Carolyn Meister, who was a student monk at Tassajara, who fell while hiking this week and passed away. And I think that particularly that Sangha, but I think many Sanghas are moved with sympathy for her. So this is the fourth and last talk on the three treasures. I'll let you figure out why there are 4 talks on 3 treasures. We like to confuse things and say, it's the new koan. So today's talk is on the third treasure, which is the treasure of the Sangha. In Buddhism, we take refuge in the 3 treasures. Can you hear me okay back? Are you all right?
Maybe a little louder.
Yeah, I'll try to remember. Just, go like this, and I'll try to notice. We take refuge in the 3 treasures. And to take refuge literally means to fly back to or to fly home. Fuge is from the Latin fugere, which means to flee or to fly, and means to do again or go back to or go home to. So when we take refuge in the 3 treasures, we fly back home to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So we replant our roots of our life in those 3 treasures. Sangha is a Sanskrit word meaning fellowship, community, or assemblage. I have to be careful because I want to say assemblage because I taught art for years, right? So we are an assemblage. Definitely we are an assemblage. Rather abstract, I think. In Buddhism, it refers to the community of those who follow the teachings of the Buddha. It can be this specific Sangha, just our group. It can be the wider community of all followers of Buddha's teachings. And in its widest sense, it can be all existence and all beings. To take refuge in the Sangha means to take refuge then in the community, to fly back home to the community, to basically find our home in the community. In the beginning, the Sangha was only ordained male monks. And it did not include women, and it did not include lay people. Women and lay people were considered the support community that provided money, goods, food, things like that for the Sangha. But the Sangha itself was only the male ordained followers. Eventually, Buddha gave in and allowed women to be ordained. And since then, the concept of Sangha has grown to include lay people and everyone who practices Buddhism. Today, in its most inclusive sense, it does include every being in all existence. So in a sense, when we take refuge in the Sangha, we take refuge in the community of all being. We fly home to the interdependence of all being, to our connectedness to the entire universe of existence. Though this is a talk about the treasure of Sangha, I'd like to start by talking about the Buddha, and specifically the historical Buddha, and particularly Siddhartha Gautama, who Buddha was originally born into a very wealthy family of the Gautama clan. He was a prince, and his family protected him, tried to protect him from all the difficulties of life. However, despite all their best efforts, he was still exposed to examples of sickness, old age, and death. And these moved him incredibly. and brought up questions for him about the nature of life, about the nature of suffering, the nature of his own existence. So eventually he left his family, including a wife and son, and he embarked on a spiritual quest, searching for answers and understanding. Like all of us, I think we come here in various ways, but most of us came looking for something. And like all of us, one of the first things we do is we look for a teacher, and Buddha did that too, and he looked for a teacher. And he found two teachers. The first one was Alara Kalama, who was a Hindu teacher who taught a life of austerity and yogic ascetic discipline. Eventually, Buddha stayed with him long enough that Alara Kalama felt that he had learned everything that he had to teach him, and he asked him to stay, and he asked him to help him teach. But Buddha was unsatisfied. He still didn't, actually at this point I should be calling him Siddhartha, because he's not Buddha yet. But Siddhartha was unsatisfied and didn't feel like he had the answers that he was looking for. So he went on to another teacher, and this was Uddaka Ramaputta, who taught a type of meditation known as the Dhyanic Formless Attainments. And as best I can tell from reading about it, this is very close to Shikantaza, a kind of meditation in which you allow everything in and you have no object of focus. And again, Siddhartha learned everything that this teacher had to teach him, and again, he was asked to stay. But Siddhartha left again and went on. And at this point, he retreated to the forest, and there he had 5 very close companions: Kondana, Budaya, Wapa, Mahanama, Asaji. I love these names. They're fun to say. And with these 5 companions, he continued the life of asceticism, often to the point of starvation, not drinking water, very difficult physical disciplines of other kinds as well. And they continued to search to deepen and widen their understanding. Toward the end of this time, and I think this was 7 years, something like that. Toward the end of this time, Siddhartha collapsed alongside a river beneath a large banyan tree, and he was thin and haggard from years of ascetic practice and from not eating. A young woman came along named Sujata, carrying a bowl of rice milk, and seeing Siddhartha, she was moved by compassion, and she offered him the bowl of rice milk. And Siddhartha refused, because to accept it was to break his vows of asceticism. So eventually he gave in. She said to him something that her parents had taught her: one should not give too much pain to himself, nor enjoy life and its comforts too much. One should always follow a middle path. So moved by her compassion and her words, he accepted the rice milk, and his strength was restored. His 5 companions, however, witnessing this, felt that he had betrayed his vows, and they left him in anger. So at that point, Siddhartha, determined to finally understand, sat down underneath the Bodhi tree and remained there until on the morning. Some people say he was there for 3 days, some people say he was there for only 1 day. There's various reports. But on the morning, upon seeing the morning star, he was enlightened. So why do I tell you all this if I'm talking about the Sangha? Because before Siddhartha became the Buddha, before he was enlightened and began to teach, he had companions and teachers on the path, good friends along the way, who supported him and shared their understanding. His understanding and his teaching did not come out of nowhere. It is not something that he did on his own. Buddha said, "I didn't invent the truth, teaching, or reality. I was like a person who finds an old castle hidden in a forest." He found these truths, these practices that became his teachings through his interactions with and support of his companions, and his teachers. The teachings and the practice that we follow today combine elements of the yogic practices that he learned from his teachers, plus ideas of the middle way that he gathered through his interaction with a larger community, not just Sujata. Some of you may know the story of the lute player and talking about how you tune a lute. And so in a very real sense, he had a Sangha before there was a Sangha. A Sangha of like-minded teachers and companions, and a culture which nurtured spiritual awakening. These are some of the basic ingredients of what we call Sangha. Following his enlightenment, Buddha went in search of people with which to share his new realization and understanding. Realizing that they might be receptive to his teaching, he searched for the five companions who had abandoned him, and he found them near the deer park at Sarnath. And there he gave his first teaching, outlining the Four Noble Truths. These five companions were the seed of the first Sangha. Soon his followers began to increase, and as they did, Thich Nhat Hanh tells us that these monks did not know the practice yet. The Buddha brought them all to Elephant Head Peak, Gaya Sisa, you probably know how to pronounce it, I don't, and began to teach them, starting with each breath, each step, the way to hold their alms bowl, to walk, to stand, to lie down, and sit. And in less than a year, he had built a Sangha of 1,250 monastics. This was truly the first Sangha. So from the beginning, the Buddha recognized the importance of Sangha. In the Upada Sutta, the Venerable Ananda said to the Blessed One, "This is half of the holy life, Lord, admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie." The Buddha replied, "Don't say that, Ananda, don't say that. Admirable friendship, admirable companionship, admirable camaraderie is actually the whole of the holy life. When a monk has admirable people as friends, companions, and comrades, he can be expected to develop and pursue the Noble Eightfold Path." So this is the Sangha, a community of practitioners who follow the Buddha's example, who study the Dharma and practice accordingly. A community which supports each other and which embodies and carries the teachings. Thich Nhat Hanh said, "Your Sangha, family, friends, and co-practitioners is the soil, and you are the seed. No matter how vigorous the seed is, if the soil does not provide nourishment, your seed will die. A good Sangha is crucial for practice." Without the Sangha to carry forth these teachings and practices, there would be no Buddha or Dharma today. The Sangha supports, encourages, and inspires us. It provides a space for us to live according to our deepest understanding. So often, people look to the teacher as the most important person in a Sangha, not realizing that the Sangha itself is the receptacle of wisdom. Roshi Gyoku tells us the teacher is important, but the Sangha is also a teacher. Sometimes people only show up if the teacher is there. But the teacher is only a teacher because there is a Sangha. He or she was trained and formed by a Sangha, and by all the other Sanghas and Sangha members who went before. So when we talk about the ancients, or we read our ancestors, each of those was part of a Sangha, and each of those was a product of a Sangha. Without a Sangha, there would be no one to hear the teacher's teaching, and it would be useless and evaporate into nothing. Sensei Shogun was in India for about a month, and it was really wonderful to see that pretty much everybody showed up on Thursday nights. And we had sometimes in the past that wasn't true. The teacher's not there, why go? But people showed up, and for me, it was really encouraging, because to me it meant that our Sangha has matured to a point where we recognize each other as supporting our practice, and we recognize each other as the receptacle of that wisdom. And we recognize each other as bodhisattvas on the path and take responsibility for supporting one another in our practice. The teacher can't carry it on their own. Each of us in our dedication to the teaching and to the path carry a piece, and together those pieces make a whole. When we show up for each other, we are beginning to recognize each other as Sangha, and we recognize the capacity of each one of us to embody the Buddha Dharma. And I know that I'm not the only one here that's had this experience, but I've often learned so much from my Dharma brothers and sisters by things they say, and as much as, from a teacher, who's also my Dharma brother. So recently we had the Hosen ceremony for Koshin, and it was absolutely wonderful. It was just a wonderful experience, and I think most people felt that way. And you may think of this as a rite of passage for Koshin, a celebration of his accomplishment in the Dharma, and it was. But it was also a perfect example of the power of Sangha. Each of us did our part, and there were no small parts. Whether you were head trainee, or shoki, or soge, or brought food, or set up, or cleaned up, or just sat in the audience as an observer. It took all of us to make it a Hosen. And if any one of those were missing, the Hosen would have been a little less, a little smaller, and therefore a little less wonderful. Seeing Koshin speak with such wisdom and understanding, and having seen his understanding blossom over the years, to me showed the power of the practice embodied in this Sangha. Where did this wisdom come from? Just like Buddha, Koshin didn't invent the wisdom and understanding he expounded. Sorry, Koshin. I know you're out there. It certainly comes from him. It certainly comes through him, and he gives it form. But through him emerged the wisdom of this Sangha and all the Sanghas that came before, back to the time of the Buddha and beyond that. That we definitely in this Sangha carry the wisdom of the ancients. He carried the wisdom that he gained from every element of his life, from this Sangha, from other groups that he's a part of, from things he reads, from podcasts he listened to, and from the life he lived, as we all do. We all find wisdom in all those places. So the Hosen was also a celebration of Sangha. Sangha being all of us coming together to form something much larger and more impactful than any one of its parts. All of us being a conduit or vehicle for the Dharma. We don't really ever come to this understanding and realization by ourselves. In Zen practice, it is understood that we enact this wisdom in our connection to one another. It's our Dharma relations renewed moment by moment as we meet each thing and each person that brings us to the truth and a kind of awakening within and beyond our suffering. Norman Fisher says Zen practice is itself a together practice. We sit together, walk together, eat together, work together, chant together, and bow together until we become one body. That is why our practice is all about compassion, not only in the sense that I am compassionate for you, but also in the sense that I am you. When we immerse ourselves in the Sangha, we recognize each other as Buddha. We support each other in our understanding of the Dharma, and as a body, we strive to embody the Buddha way. The Sangha is a receptacle for our deepest questions, our longing to understand this life, its joys, and its suffering. Roshi Gyoko, I have a wonderful quote from her from an interview that she gave, and I know that I sent it out in one of our posts, but I thought that it bears repeating here. I think that at the bottomless bottom, there is a longing to know something, to fulfill something, to live differently, to make sense of our lives, to understand what we are doing on earth. The world needs these places where people penetrate into and live out the wholesomeness of this life. The whole of life, nothing excluded. Knowing oneself as the intersection of all. We need places where people are examining this, where they're willing to spend time experiencing and being a voice for this kind of stillness in the midst of life. And so we take refuge in the Sangha, a place where this kind of penetration into deeper questions of our existence are central, and in which we are surrounded by others making this same effort. Thich Nhat Hanh says, I think that of these three treasures, Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the Sangha is the most significant for us today. Of course, the Buddha and Dharma are the basis of Sangha. However, without Sangha, a living community of people, the Buddha is someone who lived in the past, and his teaching is something printed in a textbook. Because there is a community of practitioners who follow his teaching and manifest reality in their daily activities, the Buddha and the Dharma come alive right now, right here. So, as I mentioned before, the most expansive definition of Sangha encompasses all of existence and emphasizes the interdependence of each of us in the community of all being. And I think that if there's any chance for making the world a better place, it's by our realizing that, and hopefully our dedication to that, even though we may do it imperfectly, spreads and can change the world. So in our practice, we treat everything as Sangha. The whole world becomes our community. The whole world is a reflection of ourself. We recognize everything as Buddha, engage everything as Dharma. Each thing we encounter, each experience we undergo, becomes an extension of ourselves. We appreciate everything as a treasure of interconnectedness. The whole of existence becomes our home, our Sangha, and we continually fly home to our Sangha. So I would like to end with another quote from Thich Nhat Hanh. He has a wealth of things to say on the Sangha. Like a drop of water flowing toward the sea, it knows that it can hardly succeed alone. It could evaporate halfway, become a cloud, wander here and there, and never reach the sea. But if that drop of water enters a river and allows the river to embrace and transform it, then for sure it will arrive at the sea. As practitioners, we must allow the Sangha to lead, embrace, and carry us for us to succeed. So if anyone has any comments or questions, I'd like to open it to you, if just something to say.
Thank you, Deborah, for your talk, and I was glad that you brought in the experience of the Hosen just recently, and you had mentioned to me your feeling after the Hosen, and I definitely had that experience. I have that experience every time we have a Hosen in particular, or other our numerous ceremonies, but this one in particular, and I think part of it has to do with what you talked about in terms of folks showing up when Sensei was on his pilgrimage, and the maturity of the Sangha. And I don't know if people realize what their reason or their motivation is they just show up. But I
They
wondered
may
if
show
you,
up for the cookies, you know.
well, Barbara is a huge
A draw.
huge draw. I know, the Baker Barbara. But I wondered if you had any additional thoughts that you could share about your experience or your perception of our Sangha as it is right now, since I know that you've been carrying this talk around with you as an assignment, so to speak,
Yeah.
for a while now.
For a while, a few months.
And looking at our Sangha in particular. So
Yeah. Well, first, I think I don't think people are conscious of it. I don't think I was conscious of it until I started talking about this and realized that I started looking at everything through this filter, you know. But I think one of the things I didn't include here is I read something someone said is that you can tell a really good Sangha if you walk in that they treat each other like friends and they like to talk to each other and things. And we do that now. You know, we catch up with each other, like how's this going or how's that going, and there's a kind of support in that, I think. I think one of the I want to say mistake, but it's not a mistake, misconception or something that people have a lot of times when they first start to practice is that the practice is the practice and everything else is something else, you know? But really, the point of our practice is how I relate to you, how I relate to this, you know, how I relate to my son, to my garden, to my car, you know, how I relate to each thing. And I came from a different lineage originally, and San Francisco Zen Center, and they don't do koan practice, and you have no landmarks along the way to know how you're doing in any kind of way. You just do the practice day after day after day, but you see it kind of soak into people, you know, you just see it soak in. And so I think that when we're chanting or when we're bowing or when we're drinking tea together, we're not just that's not just about drinking tea together. It's not just about eating cookies together. It's a practice in and of itself that seeps into us. You know, and that was one of the things I think it was Thich Nhat Hanh Norman said that we do all these things together and we become one body. And I think that's really important. I think that I'm hoping that sense of us grows. You know, I'm looking at Buddha's birthday as another chance to do that, and I'm not sure other people are looking at it that way. And I look at it, especially that we're including a wider Sangha, because I think one of the things that's been very disturbing to me when I first went around to another Sangha, which includes a lot of other Sanghas, other traditions, was that people would say, well, Zen's no good, you should be doing this, you know? And then, or they say, that's no good, you should be doing Zen, you know? And we're really one Sangha, and we're really all about the same thing. And it's just, we find some methods suit different people, you know? And so I guess I'm hoping that we will increase our awareness of other things besides just service and zazen are also our Sangha and our practice, I guess. I'm sorry, I'm getting long-winded on it.
No, I was hoping you would. Okay. I wanted to hear more about that, so yeah. Thank you.
Okay, there's probably more to say. You could say, we'll have a discussion someday.
I just appreciate the clarity of your talks and putting things together in such a way that it's like, oh yeah, of course, it all fits so well. Tying in kind of historical Buddha and Siddhartha and the idea that it's alive, what makes everything alive is what we do now. And then just highlighting the living nature of Buddhism, that it exists because we're here.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I just really appreciate your talks, and thank you very much. I'm glad I'm here.
One of the things I love is the Dogen says it's only a Buddha and a Buddha. You know, the Dharma only comes up between a Buddha and a Buddha. That's, you know, that's we are it. That's a tremendous responsibility, isn't it?
Can't help to. Can't help people.
Yeah, but all our mistakes are part of it too, so it's not that bad. Yes.
So I would just like to say that I've been away but have come back, and you are all so incredibly genuine. You are all so incredibly real. There's no wavering in your countenance toward people coming and going, or whoever shows up. I've just noticed it. But there is such an authenticity, such an authentic grounding in this song that I just never perceived any struggle for superiority or I'm in charge or whatever. There is this incredible, we know who's in charge, but, there's just this incredible authenticity and genuine reflection, I think, of what the Buddhist, what the Buddha had hoped would be going on through the generations and through the years. And I've been at other gatherings, et cetera, and lovely and everything, but I just cannot get over, and I'm so grateful for the genuine authenticity of this group. And you and your talk was just so important. It was just very reflective of that.
It's wonderful to hear that, you know, we don't get to see ourselves really.
No.
You know?
But
so that's wonderful to hear. I mean, even if it's not true for everyone, you know, again, I think there are things that work for certain people, not for other people. But if we even touch one person, I think that's important. Yeah. Thank you.
Ask Koshin if he
Koshin, I'm sorry.
has anything.
Oh yeah, he was the subject of my talk.
Koshin, thank you so much for your talk, Deborah. I found it exhilarating. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay. That idea of I want to talk about this more, right? This is not enough time for the concept you talked about, but in particular the host, and I'll touch on that it seemed like a blossoming, a flowering, right? Like the whole tree, the whole plant, all the roots that are in our Sangha kind of blossomed. And every part, like you pointed out, was was part of the whole. And in particular, the parts of my family. And then that's a good example of like those who don't practice being part of my Sangha. But there's a thing that distinguishes them from, just people in the general public, in that they have that, what you cited, I believe, with Roshia Gyoku, that group of people who are longing and leaning in to what it is to be a human, and to move with it skillfully and proceed. It just opens up. That's why I say exhilarating, because all these things I've been read some story last night that ties in with this, and then I was watching a little bit of a movie, and one of the characters said, I expect great things, my children to have magical powers, and it's just kind of that lust for life that comes out of rubbing shoulders with a sangha and with the supporting, wider sangha that are also just like we want to live to the I don't know, I hate to say the human potential kind of move idea because it kind of is baggage, but that idea. And so I just really appreciate your talk and the myriad questions I have to discuss. We'll have to wait for the Buddha's birthday, I believe. But I certainly appreciate your talk and our Sangha.
Yeah, it was interesting for me. It was a surprise to me that I was going to go back and talk about Buddha. But it just like when I realized how much of his story was a Sangha, that because you usually think, oh, Buddha came up with these ideas, he sat down under this tree, suddenly he realized all this stuff, and then he gives it to us, But we know that's not true. It comes out of us anyway. But I didn't know that he had teachers. Maybe I'd read at some point. I didn't know that. So, yeah, I think there's a lot about Sangha and in choosing what to put into this. In a way, I would have liked to talk more about this larger kind of sense of interconnectivity with the universe and the whole world. I love that kind of inspiring end of things. Anyway.
Okay, so we'll do the vows. And as we do the vows, the Anja, the tea goes out first, and then Jisha comes in, and then we'll do the vows. Okay.
So just as far as timing goes, it's like, as far as timing goes, once we kind of start the vows within like halfway through the first.
Then all three of us do vows to get our vows first.
Okay, so, that's right. Now I remember.
Like being dawn.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'm gonna shut the.
Okay.
Stop the recording.